Good morning. I am doing our talk for this week. I want to talk about a lot of things, so we'll just go ahead and let's see how it goes. And I'll try and stay organized for you as I try and introduce some of these ideas. This week we have a lot of information about face work, and negotiations and bargaining, these type of things. So to define face work right away, face work is work we do to maintain identity, but it's also the work we do to help others maintain their identity. And that means that almost embedded into almost every one of our conversations is some aspect of identity management going on. It is embedded in our gestures. It's embedded in the language and the vocabulary and the words we use. It's how we appear to each other and the different artifacts that we use to in our on our bodies, whether it's I'm married, I'm wearing a ring. Some people have body art, things like that, hairstyles, hair color. And when we talk about these things, these are the things that we make choices about in the way that we're presenting. And then setting is another type of identity management. Like here in my office, I have my bookshelves, I have a basket, I have some flowers, I have I'm trying to point, my lunchbox from Empire Strikes Back, sorry. And then I have my little Batman collection. There's all these different things. Oh, I have some pottery from New Mexico. And that is all part of things that are presented in part of my setting that impact my identity. And this is often why parents are concerned about who are you with and where are you going and what are you wearing, and because they're trying to manage identity and impressions and perceptions that people might make based on the way you are presenting yourself. And people are also a part of identity management. So who we hang out with, who we know, our social capital, our workplace situation, our friends, our family, all of these impact our identity as well, which depending on culture, which is why stellatine to me is a really important part to understand for face work, because we want to look at the intercultural pieces that are impacting how people are concerned and doing face work for identity. Now, so face work means that the choices I make, but then how do I acknowledge, respect, the choices of someone else and their identity choices as well? Or do I reject them or feel defensive, or is there pushback from the other towards another? And those things means that we might be experiencing an identity conflict in an interaction because someone isn't accepting our or helping us with our face work, our identity in some way. Since I struggled in school as a child, sometimes I spent a little more time trying to establish my credibility in certain contexts because of the fact that I struggled academically. I had a lot of loss of face. And so because of that, I'm always anticipating that I will not be seen as academically credible, and I will sometimes spend a little more time basically keeping up appearances, which is called face maintenance. Okay, so these social interactions that we're in constantly, we could unpack all sorts of conversations, even ones that don't seem like any conflict is going on, just in the way we introduce ourselves or the examples we choose, or the items in our grocery cart. All of these things are the way that we are daily in this minutia of identity management. It takes a lot of work. I like the word face work because boy, are we working on it or what? I'd love to hear your examples. Any examples out there of face work that you can think of with your identity? Or maybe you know someone who is struggling with being accepted, their identity being accepted, and thinking about the way that you are participating as an ally or someone who is empathetic to a situation and that their identity is under attack. So, once we have this definition, when we look at it in the context of conflicts, it becomes important when we think about how we're dialoguing with others. If there is something going on, to not, some people will push on identity as a way to escalate a conflict. So if someone's pushing these identity attacks or aggression against someone's identity or a group of people, so this is really where identity becomes complex, that maybe we're not being personally attacked, but a group of people that we have an identity connection to is being attacked or experiencing aggression, that we will sometimes pull into needing to manage our identity connection to that group. And so then that also becomes something that becomes a conflict about, even if the interpersonal interaction we're in, we're like, well, actually, you and I are doing great. We don't have a problem. But how you are perceiving that group is an attack on me because I share an identity with that group. Okay, and that is going to be really important for us. So some of the vocabularies that we have when we're looking at face work and identity, we want to identify face maintenance. And face maintenance is everything we're doing to maintain maintain identity. And that's that keeping up appearances. So it's all the choices that we're making that I talked about just a second ago. The next one would be face saving. And this is things that we are going to do in anticipation of a loss of face, which I am going to make a separate video for the Stump the Professor questions. They were so good. I'm not ready to answer all of them, but I did notice some themes popping up between the groups that I thought was kind of relevant for this idea of anticipating a loss of face, and the things we might do to prevent a conflict, an identity conflict. Like, for example, maybe I do more credibility statements about my academic experience in order to do face saving, anticipating that someone may not accept me based on childhood, based on something from a long time ago that has left that injury of credibility that I have to keep like becoming self-aware about. So that's face saving. So that's the next one. Face restoration. Face restoration is when we are faced with an attack and it's what we're going to do. We're either faced with attack or we feel our identity feels threatened in some way, or maybe someone says something that leans into stereotypes or microaggression statements that damage the social interaction of that moment. And so we might go into a defensive place. We might start explaining or apologizing or trying to um, uh, do repair work. So, face restoration is, whether it's real or imagined, it doesn't matter. If someone had an attack on identity, these are the tactics we're doing to try and repair that. Really good examples of this exist in apology statements by political or celebrity or business field personalities that have a lot of impact in society. They have high reaching, whether it's a social media or because of their political position, and they have to create an apology. Those things we would call as face restoration. And that's a good place to look for examples of this. When we're thinking about conflicts, so define it, and then we go to the conflict piece of it. We want to look at this as a way to, face restoration can help with de-escalation, depending on how some people apologize and or move into defensiveness and then move into attack. Well, I'm really sorry I did that, but I wouldn't have done that if blah, 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 if you hadn't done this, or if my feelings weren't hurt because of something you did. And if those, not that sometimes we need to be clear about where the injury came from, but when we're trying to manage a conflict and we want to not end up in a infinity loop or a cycle, we're trying to actually make motion forward. It can be really helpful to create the place of restoration without the but. It instead add an and, which maybe you've heard as a communication technique, to I want to apologize and explain why I did that action. And next time, you could help me with that so I don't fall into that as a pattern. Just adding that simple and is creating, in a conflict situation, a more collaborative approach, or an idea of I want to be on the same team, or creating cooperation so we can move on to the next item of agenda and see if we can start building trust. If, depending on the intensity of the injury, face restoration, which is actually this week, is about forgiveness and reconciliation. We want to think about the steps we're taking towards damage of trust and the repair of trust. And people who've taken the class, the organizational communication class, the whole last third of the class is about trust building, and Charles Feltman's work and Brené Brown's work on trust, which is really helpful. And I can put some links for that this week. And I did add some videos, but if anyone wants any extra information, just contact me about that. Okay. The last one in this kind of social significance of identity work is face giving and face supporting. And so these are the real-time actions that we are doing to support another person's identity. That means that what do we do? Like if someone accidentally spills coffee in the break room, or, something happens. Let's say someone trips. That's another good one, looking at people who trip on the red carpet or on going on the stairs to get their awards. They usually, there's some face giving or supporting, which sometimes we do and ignore. We turn away to help that person not lose face. and allow them to gather themselves up, or we're going to dive into helper mode and I'm going to, oh my gosh, I've spilt my coffee so many times too. Oh my gosh, let me get some paper towels, whatever it is. We might minimize that. Now, when it becomes face giving or face supporting for bigger injuries or more intense conflict situations, we want to look at this as a tactic, a tool that we can use to de-escalate a conflict. So I'm going to lean into prevent the prevention of your loss of face or the restoration of your loss of face. And what that can do as an action step can actually help construct the steps towards, again, moving forward in negotiations or finding a resolution by just doing a small action to help another, especially if they are on the opposite side. Sometimes you'll hear this in statements by people in media, the press, or, people who are doing representing. They want to try and pose a solution to an issue. So one of the things they will do in the posing of a solution is they'll do a face saving or a face restoration statement at the very beginning before they move into, this is what we need to do. That looks like, there's no excuse for what happened to you. I can't imagine what you have been through. And instead of but, and I want to add this solution that maybe we can meet on to move forward from. So like acknowledging the injury, and here's my proposal and we need to remember this part of it as well, or whatever it is, information, facts, or solutions, however they come in. Okay, so that is one aspect of face and in conflict management and face work. The next layer to this is the significance of intercultural communication. So Stella Toomey, and please I apologize if I am not saying that correctly, but her work is essential, and it's called face negotiation theory. And what she has done is really taken this idea of face, loss of face work, and pulled it into what is happening in the intercultural encounter. So intercultural and interpersonal encounter, which means that we're trying to plot the salience. And by salience, I mean like the intensity and impact of culture on an interaction. So for example, if I were to plot this out, I would have culture as intercultural salience and interpersonal salience. So maybe I'm in an international airport in a country where I don't speak the language, and I'm waiting for my next connecting flight, and I want to order food at a place in the airport, or I want to go purchase something. We would say I have to have this interpersonal interaction, buying a pack of gum and a magazine, and I would say that would be low on salience, on the interpersonal salience, and low on intercultural because I'm in an international airport. It's not saying that there isn't any intercultural, it's highly intercultural interaction, but it's low in its intensity. And because there's so many different multicultural experiences going on, I would assume that the person working in that environment has developed techniques for getting through an interaction with low impact or low problems. Not to say it can't escalate quickly, right? And then there is, just in comparison, if we were to go to high salience impact of culture, of interpersonal, that's like getting married or doing a business with someone from a different country. You're going to sign a contract and do intercultural, do a business transaction with partnership, create a partnership with someone from a completely different culture group and language. Same with marriage. Okay, I've mixed it up in my head. So the business deal or marriage, those are the encounters that might have higher salience. And then on the intercultural piece, if it was high intercultural salience, we would say that that would be with someone who speaks a completely different language or has completely different, like collectivism versus individualism, those kind of things that are impacting our ability to go back and forth with flow on negotiating the situation. For a wedding, if it's an intercultural marriage, we can see, and maybe you don't even have to be in another country. You could have someone with two different religions or people with from two different regional foods in the same country, and that could have a higher intercultural salience impact on trying to plan a wedding of two families coming together. Okay, so that's all to say that Stella Ting Toomey, she is looking at the cultural variability of to highlight how people are navigating through these experiences. And we want to be careful not to add individualism or collectivism and stereotype that, but that's why I gave that lecture before, so you can identify those aspects of a interpersonal encounter without reducing people into their stereotypes. So if someone is more from a collective culture, the way that they're doing face work is going to be moving towards group harmony. And if group harmony means not debating, not challenging, it could also mean that we want to keep this in the group. I don't want to consult out. I want us in the group to figure it out. Those can be ways that collective cultures might be trying to find face-saving ways to manage conflict. Where individual or Western societies are going to be more on individual face-saving, they might be willing to more dive into, here's my opinion. And I'm not going to be going for group harmony because I want to move towards problem solving, which means we need to lean into our different opinions so we can find the best solution. Okay, I like this part of your idea, but my idea has this, and this. And those kind of intercultural clashes, people can have extreme loss of face in a negotiation or a conflict situation that can impact trust. It can impact productivity, and then it can create these emotional burdens where someone in the group might be creating more emotional labor or doing more work. Like, I want to prove myself that I'm the hard worker of this group. And so I'm just going to show up early and I'm going to do this. And that would be more of a I'm going to save face for my own identity or self. I actually just saw this, I'm remembering now, on Naked and Afraid last night when they had a group of 4 people, and there was one person who was always going out and trying to work even at it's like 104 degrees outside, and they're still outside working and they're burning calories and exhausting. And the rest of the team is like, this is the time where we've got to actually nap and rest and get our energy up. So as soon as it cools down, we can go back out and get some work. And that to me was an intercultural clash of individualism versus collectivism, because she was so concerned with the proof of her identity and credibility, that she was kind of sacrificing herself for the group. And remember, individualism is for the group as well. It's just the self-concern of credibility of how I show up for the group. Where when they did finally bring up the tension, there was an agreement to move into how we were going to manage our time and our energy. I guess we'll see if that actually works out as it keeps going. It's one of the reasons why I like to watch some of these shows, because you can sometimes unwrap conflict and look at some of these theories and use them to practice identifying them. It's much harder to do when you're in your own communication event and they're in the minutiae moment of it. It is very difficult sometimes to see it as it's actually happening. It takes a lot of practice. Okay, the other things about Ting Tumi, okay, sorry for the pause. I'm just making sure that I'm being efficient with what I want to share about this. Okay, so the things about this face work with the intercultural is there are so many different cultures, and there's multicultural, like nationalities and religions and food and music, and there's lots of different ways, right? We've talked about this before. When I'm in this class and I say different cultures, I'm talking really about the anthropological and social communication, social interactions that come with culture, like gender and individualism, collectivism, low context, high context, uncertainty, avoidance, and power. And I'm going to spend a minute to talk a little bit about power as the next thing that we kind of want to understand about intercultural communication and conflicts. So there's low power and high power distance. And this is a theory developed by Greet Hofstede. Please excuse me again if I've mispronounced the names, but this is a German theorist, which you could actually watch. He made a series of videos with his son who studies the same topics on YouTube, and you can watch him talk about it. But you can get it through me as well here in a more abbreviated fashion. But power distance is the acceptance or non-acceptance that the people who hold power have more authority, they have more privilege, and more authority and privilege than other people in the group. So whether you accept that people who hold positions of power should have more privilege than other people in the group would be a high power distance. If you do not accept it, you are more low power. So saying someone has high power or does not mean they have power, or in this theory. Or if someone says that they're more low power, it doesn't mean they don't have power. High power, low power are cultural groups of how we perceive power. Okay, so if you are for cultures that are more high power distance, this is where we say distance because of the privilege and authority uh, that they, depending on the spectrum of it, you might not have access to the people in power, that they are removed. There is not access, meaning even no, we don't question it. If you want to meet with them, you would have to be either introduced or you would have to have some type of significance to who you are to even be able to shake their hand or get a picture with them. You might pay a lot of money to meet this person, like a fundraiser dinner that's going to have someone of a high power status at it. You might pay per plate a certain amount just to be in the room to see that person walk on stage and wave. Or you might, high power is also in the distance. Let's say there's a certain amount of security around them. There might be geographical distance to their location, to your location. These are all the type of things. In a company, uh, what floor, right? Sometimes high rises and floors are considered distance. The higher up you are in the building is metaphorically part of that power structure. And if you accept that as part of the structure of that culture, you are a high power person. Okay. It doesn't mean you have the power. It means you are a high power cultural in that culture. For example, military is very hierarchical, and the highest ranking officials of the military who might have offices in the Pentagon or in the White House, that there's the structure is that you may not ever meet that person, and you accept that because, and here we go, why would we accept that some people have more power and privilege? Is that it is about safety, it is about concern for the group, and it is that we're not going to question them. They don't have to report back to us in any way because their job is so important that they should not be interrupted, that they have a very, very important job to do, whether it's a figurehead for a monarchy or a military leader that is trying to keep strategy and the safety of a group together, that you will not be able to have access to them. So safety and economic stability become the main reasons why we might accept that structure. In a low power distance, in contrast, a low power distance says that there's still people in power. We still have someone in charge, but we consider that role rotating in and out, that there is a time limit to that position, and that we will decide at the end of the time limit if they should allow to be continue in that job, or is there like term limits for presidents, or that we will have access to removing them. Either, and in a workplace, a job review or a performance review might be part of how we might assess whether that person should belong in power or not, and who is doing that review would be more. So that's one aspect of low power, is that there is a limit and it's rotatable. And we would say that the rest of the group could have access to that position based on an agreement by the group or by their expertise or experience, that we might take someone else from the group. So definitely like clubs on campus, or different or groups will often rotate. A board members might have a limit and then they get rotated with other people on campus. Sometimes we have a student representative or different faculty come in, so that rotation is part of the low power culture agreement, that whoever does have the authority, whoever does have power for making the decision, is answerable to the group, that there is some type of accountability to the group, and that there is, and we can question them. There has to be transparency. So we might say, okay, the Supreme Court is, there's no once you get in, it's there's no rotation out of that. And they are voted in to the Supreme Court based on representatives deciding if they belong there or not. But a president of the United States is voted in by the group, but they're then removed into this very much more distanced place. And then we have Secret Service around them, and we have the press. So this idea of the White House press corps is this barrier that we put in as representing more lower power on the spectrum. Definitely not low power, definitely not way over here. It's definitely not like a club or a different type of organization of low power. It still has some, it definitely is high power elements, but the press is supposed to be how we keep up this idea of questioning authority. And there's supposed to be transparency and things like that in that office as a decision if they should stay or if they should go. So that's one way to think about low power. And if you, okay, so that's the definition of it. It took a minute, but I really wanted you to understand that. If you are more low power and you are in an office or an organization that is very high power in its structure, you are going to feel a loss of face. We're back to Facework. Woo, we made it. You're going to feel your identity will not match what the structure of power of the group. And because if you're more low power in that high power, let's say it's a classroom, right? It's a classroom, and a low power student who, let's say I'm a high power teacher, I'm going to be like, I don't care your opinion. Here's the test. You got it right. You got it wrong. You can find the information in my lecture. You can find the information on Canvas. Read your book. Don't ask me questions that if you haven't watched my lecture, if you haven't read the book, please don't even ask me a question. I don't want to hear it. Right? That's going to be a very high power distance teacher response. And then if you're low power, you're going to feel a real attack on your identity and your face. And you're like, I'm going to ask a question anyway. Why do we need to know this? There'll be this rebellion that comes up to try and attack the identity of the person in charge. And it could, if you don't have the ability to have access to that person, the rebellion will come out in trying to find allies. I'm going to find other people who also don't like this structure. We're going to form our own small subculture, low power distance subculture group, and we're going to start to create microaggression or indirect aggression, passive aggressions, things that will start to attack that person in power, or attack the organizational structure or the institution that has created that. And that can be either extremely aggressive, or it can be itsy bitsy. In the classroom, it'll be like, I don't understand why this is even important to know. So when you say vocabulary, what do you mean by vocabulary? Because isn't every word a vocabulary word? Okay, I don't know. I'm just trying to think of ways that these little kind of rebellious. So some of you might have experiences with having we have a lot of people in who are in the sports world, and I bet you can come up with a lot of ways that coaching has different power distance structures and different layers of authorities, and then whether the team, if you have one person on the team who accepts that or doesn't, and how that can create um, this kind of instability to trust in the entire team because of these ways that they are creating rumblings of rebellion within the group that will undermine the structure of the coach or coaches. Okay. And sometimes we need that. Sometimes there needs to be an overthrow. Sometimes not. I don't want to get into that part, but that is part of negotiation of when we think about how this connects to how we're managing conflict and negotiations. So we can deal with face counterproductively and ignore face concerns that can escalate the situation. So if let's just do the opposite, since I did low power with high power. If you're more of a high power structure person, high power distance culture person, individual in a low power structure. So my classrooms are very low power in their structure. And that means that I'm going to be like, let's talk about it. I want to hear your opinion. My opinion isn't the only opinion. Uh, right? It doesn't mean that there isn't someone in charge. It doesn't mean there isn't authority making decisions when you're in low power structure. It's just saying that everyone in the group, there's transparency, and everyone in the group has value and should have input into the group structure. Um, it does take a lot more time when you're in low power structures like task forces or stakeholder meetings. When they become more collaborative, it's just going to take a lot of time to negotiate even what the problem is, let alone the solution. You're going to be spending a lot more time on the problem because of that need to get everyone involved and into that cooperative space. So going back to our Facework, uh, this kind of small power distance or low power distance, it creates a lot of more informality in its structure. And when high power distance is trying to manage a conflict with a low power distance person, they're going to be, high power distance is just going to be like, just tell me what to do. What's going to be on the test me on this, and stop asking me my opinion. I definitely don't care about anyone else's opinion. That's wasting my time, right? High power is going to feel like you're wasting my time with all this talking. Let's just get a decision and let's move forward, right? Let's move forward. Who's in charge? And let's lean into that. So thinking about when you're doing a conflict situation, is the other person having more concern with the vertical framework as a way to manage the conflict? Or is someone trying to be heard and squashing the voices into more voices? Which one? And it could be asymmetrical in the way that someone is it, but what if it's symmetrical? What if you have high power distance negotiating with another high power distance structure and the vertical concerns of that? One thing with, I don't want to talk about something that I don't I don't have a lot high expertise in union negotiations, but just as to put a pin, since that's been a lot happening when we've been listening to the news with the writers' strike and the union strike and the auto workers, that uh, uh, the unions can have vertical structures just like corporations, even if they're, again, trying to squash it into more, I want more transparency, I want more low power. And sometimes because the negotiators on this side, on the corporation side of the table, might actually be low power too. That maybe that's why they're there and they're showing up and they want to get all these opinions. And we want to build teams. We want to build, we're all going to the same destination. Let's pull back and let's be cooperative and collaborative through this process. But sometimes the people who are pushed into being the face of negotiations are answerable to a much high power structure behind them that has eliminated their ability to have power in that conflict structure. And some of you might be in situations like that as well, and thinking about having to manage your identity in the interpersonal encounters when you are having to represent something that doesn't necessarily match up to your cultural identity is a question I have for you. Tell me all about it. I want to hear all about it. I'm so fascinated with this topic. This is, there's a lot of information to kind of manage when we talk about identity. I feel on the first day of our lecture, I was like, we could rename this class Perceptions. Well, here we go again. I'm going to just say we could rename this class Identity Management as well, because a lot of conflict comes from this work we're trying to do to maintain identity. Now, the last part of this video, I just want to pull into this idea of the way relationships come together and the way relationships come apart. And how do we maintain and manage our relationships? Because I feel like in a leadership program, we're not just talking about our workplaces, we're also talking about our families, we're talking about our romantic lives, we're talking about parenting. Because when we are a leader, we are in a place where we can have a 360 approach to life so that we can emotionally show up for ourselves and others as we manage certain situations. And as we go into the holidays, which was a great question by one of the teams, I'll do a little bit more. I might actually just create a whole module page for you on managing Thanksgiving, because that seems like, God, we could just do a whole week on that. Thanksgiving week, I'll do that. Okay. No, I want you to be able to think about the tools in your toolbox. So maintenance, let me go back to that piece of the term. Relationship maintenance model. I put up some definitions for maintenance, relationship maintenance, because I'm back. Because of this idea of how do we maintain things in a way that we have shared narratives, we have shared identities. We're doing that face work, and we meet people who are willing to engage with us in helping us maintain our face, and we're doing the work to help them maintain their face. But then we run into situations where we need to reestablish our individual identity and say, as much as I want to be a part, I am also separate. right? That's the connection, autonomy, dialectical tension of that we are constantly negotiating, and where we might find polarization of what should I do? Should I be worried more about the harmony of this group, or do I need to take care of myself right now? And I need to be seen that I'm different. Well, the truth is you need both. There's no way around it. You need both of those things. But we call it a dialectical tension because of this polarization, that if we are aiming for harmony of the group, there is a little bit loss of self in that shared narrative. And if I am just going to push for self-identity, and I need to do that, I have face concerns about my reputation, about my sense of character or my status, that I'm going to, if I push the gas pedal on this side of identity management, I'm going to be stepping away from that group harmony, or that shared narrative to make myself be heard. And where's the balance in that? When we look at that with groups of people, so you have your I identity, so you have your I, and you have your we identity, and then you have our us identity. So there's I, we, us. And the tensions of how we're managing that, in interpersonal interactions, if it's a we identity, that's where now I'm concerned about my group's identity, meaning when I use the term we for this context, I mean it as my family's identity, my shared, my my team I'm on, my workplace, my organization I work for. I'm concerned about the identity of that group that I have a direct interpersonal belonging to. When we move into the us identity, that's when it goes back to that other thing I talked about, where your identity expands to people you don't know that you have a tribal connection to, right? When we see things happening to groups of people, that we've never met before, but we have a tribal connection to that, we can be pulled into the us identity and wanting that as well. So one of the things when you want to manage your conflict along these different significance, I guess you want to go back to that Hawker and Wilmot's definition of definition of really trying to say, what is your goal? So since I mentioned Thanksgiving, is Thanksgiving what is your goal at Thanksgiving? What is your shared goal at Thanksgiving? Sometimes holidays can be, and it doesn't have to be Thanksgiving, it can be any cultural holiday where we're gathering together. People are managing all of these different identities, and because of the tension of a holiday and the impact of the stress of, okay, we all got to come together, we are trying to get a meal on the table, we have all these traditions that we need to make sure that we check off. Just for example, I talked to my mom yesterday about Thanksgiving dinner, and she is very clear that she is making the zucchini because it's her mother's recipe and it has to be done right. Now, I've been eating that zucchini at my grandma's house before she passed away, at my mom's house. I've never had a Thanksgiving anywhere but at my mom's house. And I have finally gotten the dinner for the first time in my entire life. This will be my third time having Thanksgiving at my house. But she insists, even though I've made the zucchini, I make it all the time. It's my grandmother's recipe. It's her mother's recipe. I know this recipe, but she wants to do it right? Like, so that is like that group for me, the group harmony, the we identity is really important, but I see my mom trying to present face, that she wants the face work of the zucchini and her attachment to that dish and the way it's made for our dinner table, right? This is one of the challenges when I became a blended family of food can be highly emotional, and children attachment to certain items that they associate with a holiday, and then they're in a blended family and they lose power over what's at the dinner table. They have a loss of we identity face, the face, and they're coming to the table with a loss of face, and the restoration of that face, um, or might, and if it's a high power, if they have no power in that, I'm going to put food on the table and you're going to eat it and you're going to like it, and I don't want to hear about it, right? Like if there's a high power structure to the family, you will see a lot of either shutting down as a survival technique, or that kind of stonewalling, that kind of shutdown thing that might happen, or you're going to see rebellion show up either in that passive aggressive, indirect aggressive way, or it's going to show up in aggression, full on aggression, right? So those are things that I'm just trying to find ways to kind of apply everything we talked about to family events that happen. And if you know someone is coming to the table who is very concerned about tribal identity or the us identity, are they more concerned about the we and our family's identity? Or someone coming to the table that has lost their own individual status, or they're not being accepted in the family for some choices, or the way that they want to be accepted in their identity, you're going to see a lot of conflicts showing up this way, as well as in the workplace. Gosh, I'm so excited about this lecture that I was able to get you some information, because I think this one is so vitally important. So I hope it was helpful. And of course, I could talk a lot more about this. I didn't talk too much about the relationship maintenance model. Gosh, do I want to just add that in really quick right now? Oh, I do. Okay, just a couple more minutes. I was doing my in conclusion response. And if you're ready to go, you can always just pause it and come back later if you want to. But the NAPS relationship maintenance model, the main thing I really wanted to talk about is the differentiating step. So the differentiating step, which I really like about this model, that's where conflict exists in the model. When we talk about a conflict, when we talk about a disagreement, when we talk about a negotiation, this is the reestablishing of individual identities on the differentiating step, which is the same step as the integrating step, which is the step where we create shared identities. So there's shared identities on integrating. Differentiating is where we pull it back part again. How we show up is this whole class to this piece of face work. Are we going to do face work? Are we going to be doing face giving and supporting, or is there going to be an attack on someone's face? Sometimes people have such different reactions to conflict situations that if they are an avoider, if they have to accommodate all the time and they're never accommodated or recognized for their face concerns, or whatever it is the situation is going on, some people will move into that place of, okay, I'm just going to avoid this And I will now pretend like this is no longer a problem for me. Anything wrong? No, I'm fine. Everything's okay. Right? And so someone will move down a step, and the differentiating is not a bad step if it's done functionally. But if someone moves into circumscribing is often where we're going to keep up appearances that everything is okay, but we start to we've lost trust either in ourselves and in the other person. And we are going to now start building the wall. I will no longer feel safe sharing information with you. I will now be very, very hesitant and careful, maybe around certain topics, or maybe for my entire identity. And I will now retract and not feel safe sharing it with you. That's tough. Being in circumscribing is where someone's keeping up appearances, but they have exited. And the other person might move into circumscribing with them, or because people are often not on the same step at the same time, they might constantly bring up the topic, and be in that summarizing, flooded place and not recognize that the other person is behind the wall. And then if the circumscribing person can convince the person that, oh yeah, I agree with you, you win, I agree, yay. But they don't, they've moved into circumscribing, the other person might move back into integrating. And that's the stage where they feel like, oh, we agree, we have a shared narrative, we see the world the same, hurrah, hurrah. And everything is okay for that person. And they will stop fighting because they're so happy that I persuaded you, I changed your mind. Like, that's a thing. I'm sorry, that's not a thing. We can talk about persuasion later, but how to persuade someone is intricate thing that is like picking up Mount Everest and moving it a millimeter in a direction. Okay, it is going to be earthquake, avalanches, and it's difficult to change your mind. If you ever feel like you were convinced of something, it's usually something you already at your core agreed with. But I'll get into that later. I'm sorry, I'm getting off on another topic. So when you have someone in circumscribing and someone in the integrating stage, this is where that term that you hear often, I was blindsided, because circumscribing is moving into the exiting place of the relationship. They're creating an exit strategy. They're still in the relationship. They're keeping up appearances, but maybe for economic reasons or health reasons or other things, they're still pretending this is a relationship. But if the other person's in the integrating stage, if that person breaks up with them or quits their job or whatever it is, I'm going to move out before the lease is up, however we're applying to whatever relationship we're applying this to, that person might feel blindsided, right? To use that kind of everyday vernacular term. And what we want to realize is that it was there all along, but we weren't really leaning in and engaging in the experience of the other person to understand it. Why you have to be really careful to not be too dismissive in conflicts because of this erosion of trust that ends up sometimes happening. Okay, now I'm done for now. I have to say there is so much more I could talk about, but I wanted to get you a video, get it up for you, and I hope you have a good week. Later this week, I'll be making our Q&A Stump the Professor video. I can't wait for that. So everyone, I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.